Hey, I'm Usar. Today I want to redo one of the first videos I ever made on this channel with improved editing, a better script, and in higher detail. This will include a little bit of math, a little bit of music theory, and hopefully a lot of new understanding. Let's talk about harmonics, shall we? Chapter 1. What are harmonics? What you're looking at now is a spectral analysis of my voice, a visual representation of every frequency present, from low to high. Each one of these peaks is a harmonic, which can be thought of as its own independent frequency or tone. If I hold a note, I can even isolate out each sine wave for us to hear. The lowest harmonic is called the fundamental because it's the foundation upon which we derive every other harmonic we can see. For most sounds, we can follow a very simple mathematical pattern called the harmonic series. To explain this a little bit better, let me grab a guitar. When I strike this string, we get a vibration at a frequency of 110 Hertz. If I divide the string in half and strike it again, the string vibrates twice as fast, 220 Hertz. If I divide it into thirds, I get 330 Hertz, and if I was able to divide it into quarters, I could get 440, fifths to 550, on and on up into infinity. This is, at its core, the harmonic series. 1 plus 1/2 plus 1/3 plus 1/4, all the way up to 1 over infinity. You can also think of it as a series of multiples. 1x plus 2x plus 3x plus 4x, etc., with x representing our starting frequency. All these multiples exist at the same time as our fundamental. If I hold my finger lightly enough on the halfway point of this string, I can prevent the entire length of the string from vibrating but allow everything from half the length and up to vibrate through, which is why they call it playing the harmonics. The same is true if I isolate at 1/3 or 2/3 the length of the string. Some harmonics can be isolated more or less easily than others, but in theory you could isolate out every individual harmonic in this guitar string. You'll sometimes hear these harmonics referred to as overtones because they are harmonic tones that exist over the fundamental. This can often lead to a lot of confusion because the second harmonic is the first overtone. In math, this is a very common problem of indexing, whether you start counting from 0 or 1. A similar mix-up occurs in music when we talk about the distance between notes, because just like how you can refer to distance with harmonics and overtones, you can refer to distance with tones, or steps, and scale degrees. To give you a point of reference, when we're talking about overtones or semitones, we begin counting from 0. When we're talking about harmonics or scale degrees, we begin counting from 1. Chapter 2. Odd, Even, and Chromatic. When I played the second harmonic on the guitar, it likely sounded less like I changed notes and more like I played the same note higher, right? Every time we double or halve a frequency, we change the octave of that note. This is important for two reasons. First, we can establish a useful pattern when tuning the notes we use for music by dividing up the frequencies between each octave and repeating those divisions every time we change octaves, which lines up nicely with how our ears tend to perceive changes in pitch. Second, we can set up a logical framework to understand all of the harmonics in the harmonic series. Every even-numbered harmonic represents an octave of whatever odd number that you land on when dividing by 2. And every odd-numbered harmonic represents a hypothetical new note for us to have within an octave, provided we divide it in half to fit between 1 and 2. If we take the third harmonic and divide that in half, we get 1.5, our first new note that coincidentally lies halfway, mathematically speaking, between our octave, while the sixth harmonic is just an octave multiple of that same note. The third harmonic is actually pretty special, in that we can use it to build one of the foundational scales that you can find in almost every culture, the pentatonic scale. If I were to play the notes represented by the first and third harmonics on the piano, where the fundamental frequency, I should do this at a piano. That's what I should do. If I were to play the notes represented by the first and third harmonics on the piano, where the fundamental frequency is that 110 Hertz note we were talking about before, I'd be playing the note A for our fundamental, and the note E an octave up. Let's bring that E down to exist in the same octave as our root. If we repeat the process with that as our new fundamental, we get the note B. Bring it down to the same octave as our first fundamental, and repeat again. We get the note F sharp. Then we get the note C sharp. Then we get the note G sharp. That's a spicy note. To avoid the spiciness, let's stop there and look at the 5 notes we have. A, B, C sharp, E, and F sharp. The pentatonic major scale, just from following those 2 rules, as well as a hidden 3rd rule. The perfect 5th is our closest new note. If we didn't stop at that G sharp and exclude it, we could actually get to a full heptatonic scale by going 1 step further and adding in D sharp. If we compare that to what we now know as the major scale, there's just a single note of difference here. The D sharp is lowered to a D natural. What we have instead is known as the Lydian mode. The reason why we use the D natural for our main major scale is that the D sharp represents one of the spicier musical intervals. The augmented 4th, also known as the tritone. Not the devil in music as some may assert, but much more dissonant than the perfect 4th, a semitone below it. We can also build these scales just by climbing up the odd-numbered harmonics. In fact, the entire chromatic scale can be built just by following this having the odd harmonic technique. On screen I have the equivalents listed, as well as in the description down below if you want to copy and paste it for your own records. If you notice, I have a few notes listed as microtones, because they exist outside of our 12-note scale, but could exist in a different tuning system. If we took every odd number in the first 5 octaves of the harmonic series and fit them into the span of a single octave, we could have a 16-note chromatic scale, rather than just 12 notes. That's pretty cool if you ask me. Here's a comparison of our normal 12-tone scale and that hypothetical 16-note scale, using Ableton Live's microtuner effect. As a final note in this section, we can convert the fractional or decimal values into mathematical ratios, which you'll often see people using when discussing these interval relationships. For example, an octave is a ratio of 2 to 1, and a perfect 5th is a ratio of 3 to 2. I like to relate these ratios back to the physics of the wave. For every 1 cycle of our fundamental, the octave has 2 cycles. For every 2 cycles of our fundamental, the perfect 5th has 3. If you want to verify this for yourself, you could show these relationships by counting cycles in an oscilloscope, or by playing back square waves of the ratios at frequencies lower than the limits of human hearing. This is also why you can have these cool demonstrations of taking polyrhythms and speeding up the tempo until they become a musical interval. Chapter 3. Equal versus just. I have a confession to make. I actually lied to you throughout the previous section of this video. These notes aren't actually the 12 chromatic notes in our octave. They're just really close approximations, because as we start stacking these notes together, we end up with situations where some pairings sound much worse than others. The classic example of this is the wolf fifth. If we have 12 pairs of perfect fifths, one of those fifths will sound much more tense than the others. Hey, so I was actually a little bit wrong here. There's more than 1/5 that sounds more tense. We'll look at that in this demonstration right here, so just wanted to clear that up. The difference between these chromatic scales and the one we currently use is the difference between just or mean temperament and equal temperament. In just temperament, the tuning is much closer, though not necessarily identical, to the perfect ratios that we can derive using the harmonic series we just talked about. There's a whole lot of weirdness that goes into how different systems derive these distances, and I'll link to some resources in the description for those who are interested. But just know that while these ratios are nice and round, they can also result in some problematic notes. Equal temperament, on the other hand, is about taking the distance in an octave and giving each note equal weight, dividing it up equally, which is why you might also see it referred to as equal division of the octave, or EDO. If we look at the ratio of an equal tempered perfect fifth, we get 2 to the power of 7 over 12. That looks a lot more complicated than a simple 3 over 2, but let's go back to the decimal versions. A justly tuned perfect fifth is 1.5. An equal tempered perfect fifth is approximately 1.498, and the wolf fifth is approximately 1.479. It's definitely not 1.5, but it's so close it might as well be, and it's certainly closer than the wolf fifth. To illustrate this difference, I've set up a trio of sine waves inside of kilohertz phase plan. One is going to play the fundamental, one will play a justly tuned perfect fifth, represented as a harmonic multiplier of 1.5, and one will play an equal tempered perfect fifth, represented as +7 semitones. If I play the root and one of the two fifths, it doesn't really matter which, they sound practically identical. However, if I play the two fifths at the same time, the distance between the frequencies causes a beating pattern due to the phase cancellation. Chapter 4: Ramifications and Uses. So, why does this matter? Beyond being an interesting factoid, why would we even want to build a chromatic scale using the Harmonic series? Why not just use the 12 EDO system we're used to? First, this knowledge allows you to more effectively experiment with microtonal music and explore different tuning systems or divisions of the octave. You could write music in 16 EDO, like we played around with earlier. You could write in just temperament and have chords that are even more consonant or more dissonant than you can get with equal temperament. You can play around with mean tone, Pythagorean, or a whole host of other tuning systems with more confidence in why you're using those systems. Put another way, you don't have to be as afraid of exploring as you may have been before. Second, this information comes into play when working with various types of sound design and synthesis, particularly with FM synthesis. Let's look at two synthesizers that both incorporate FM: Native Instruments FM8, which is based off of the Yamaha DX7 FM synthesizer, and X for Records Serum, a wavetable synth that includes some FM capabilities. In FM8, there are a ton of numbers that, to a new user, can seem intimidating, but these are just harmonic multipliers. So if you want to modulate your carrier wave with an octave, just set the modulator wave to 2 or 4 or 8. A fifth? 1.5 or 3 or 6. A minor sixth? 13 or 26 or 3.25. The options become a lot more engaging. In Serum, you don't actually have that option, which is why FM in Serum tends to sound slightly different from what you'd find in a synth like FM8. If you FM a sine wave with another sine at an octave in a perfect fifth, the equal tempered equivalent of the third harmonic, that's more like FMing at a multiplier of around 2.996. And if you want FM8 to sound more like Serum, you'd want to use that value instead of 3. Lastly, you can use this knowledge to play with the listener's impression of whatever chord you're using. Since equal tempered notes are close enough to justly tuned notes, your listeners will be able to accept the change between them more readily. Imagine using the Picardy third, where the final chord in a minor key song ends on a major chord, where you end on a justly tuned major chord rather than the equal tempered version. Maybe it's just me, but there's that extra little boost of resonance that tickles my eardrum from the reduced phase cancellation between the overtones. In fact, well-trained musicians like orchestras or choirs tend to do this naturally. They'll line up the notes in the chord they're singing with the overtone series. That's all for this one. I hope you found this information useful. If so, I'd appreciate a like on the video. Now, I'd really like to hear from you. Do you have a preference between equal temperament and just temperament? Have you experimented with any of these ideas before? Is there any usage for this information that I might have missed? questions, comments, criticisms, whatever, please leave a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching, and a special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you want to support the channel and join that list you see on screen right now, as well as gain access to my Patreon-only sample packs and tutorials that can't or won't go on YouTube for whatever reason, click on the link in the description below. Consider subscribing to the channel and checking out my other videos. Hit the bell icon to get notified of new uploads. Check out my Twitter or join my Discord to see what else I'm up to. With that, thanks again and have a great day.